Hi guys, my name is Logan Charmatero. Today we're going to be discussing, actually comparing high repetition strength training versus low repetition strength training. So background of high repetition and low repetition, mostly just resistance training in general. So resistance training, it's a staple for any athlete, for any person looking to reach a fitness goal. And the constant confusion is whether they should be training with high repetition or low repetition and how they should be incorporating maybe both of those aspects to become the overall best athlete they could be. When we talk about being an athlete, overall athletics, typically the athlete's going to be focusing on power, strength, and endurance. So when an athlete looks at a resistance training program, they want to make sure that they're incorporating all those aspects. So this question is, mainly for society who is looking to reach any sort of fitness goal or train for a sport. We have so many we have so many self-trained people out there without coaches, and you either have one side of the spectrum where they lift constantly heavy every day because all they want to do is be big and strong, or you have an athlete that is choosing to run miles all the time. And we want to find out that fine line between what we think for each fitness goal is most beneficial. And the fitness goal that we're surrounding this is the average everyday athlete that is going to be striving for overall good strength, overall great speed, and good power. Being able to perform plyometrics movements as well as heavy barbell movements or heavy strongman incorporations, being able to squat a lot, and you can be able to run a sub 6 minute mile. So we want to kind of discuss that aspect of what we're training for. So this research is gonna give society better knowledge base of how to properly train for a goal. We want to make sure that every athlete stays injury free, but we also want to make sure that they're getting the most out of their fitness. Someone who trains just hitting their chest muscles over and over again is going to be and just hitting heavy is going to be a major athletic difference than someone who incorporates sprints with their heavy resistance training or etc. So the research question is, what are the benefits of high repetition strength training versus low repetition strength training in the measures of athletic performance, power, speed, endurance, etc.? So our hypothesis for this is going to be high repetition strength training will increase athleticism overall rather than low repetition strength training. Just based off of the research that I've read about this research question, a lot of people were saying for overall athleticism, high repetition strength training is better, but it depends what sport you're training for or what your goal is. So we're gonna see if our research can break that question. So the methods I'm going to be using for this research question to break it down is we're going to have 10 participants overall. We're going to have the low repetition athlete, which is the power lifter. Powerlifters train for three lifts: the deadlift, the bench press, and the squat, the back squat. So and they get three attempts at each of these lifts, and so they're aiming for highest weight lifted, so a 1 rep max for each of these. So these athletes' main goal is they are focusing on very low repetition training and in straying away from the muscle endurance, because in their sport they don't need to be able to have a high repetition of lifts and everything, and they don't need to include aerobic capacity or VO2 max or anything like that. These guys are strictly building large amount of muscle and looking at moving weight efficiently and the fastest that they can be. Second is we have 5 elite CrossFit athletes. So the CrossFit athlete is going to be the well-rounded athlete, kind of what we're striving for here, what we're looking for. They train in heavy repetition barbells, but high repetition, and also they're very skilled in low repetition. They're very skilled in aerobic capacity and gymnastics body weight movements. So I thought this would be a good comparison overall because they're two totally different athletes and they're on the opposite side of the spectrum. To make sure that we're getting the best the best reliability and validity out of our research here, we want to make sure the athletes remain relatively the same. So we're going to look to get a 190 pound to 210 pound athlete on each scale. I realize that some people will go in kilos. We'll just convert that. So whatever the kilo conversion is on that, and we're going to compare these as well. And we want to make sure that they're all at the elite level. So that way you don't have an amateur powerlifter versus an elite CrossFit or vice versa. The procedures that we are going to evaluate here is the back squat, the deadlift, and the press. Overall, I think these are the best tests of athletic capability. The back squat, being able to use your legs and full body and your core to move weight. Your deadlift, pulling from the ground. I realize these are all barbell movements, but I wanted to keep them all similar and fast and be able to keep them in the same environment. And then we're going to see how much weight they can be lifted for each repetition of a 1 rep max, a 5 rep max, a 10 rep max, a 20 rep max, and a 30 rep max. Obviously, these athletes are going to get, this can be over the course of 5 weeks. They're going to get adequate rest in between, so they're going to be fresh lifts for every one of these athletes. The statistical tests. So this study utilizes strength, muscular endurance, power, and overall athleticism. You have to be able to have a good aerobic capacity to hit a 30 rep max. If anyone's ever done a 30 rep max back squat, you are breathing more than you are muscular exhausted at the end. So that's a full body test. The analysis could be thrown out when athletes break in form. So we want to make sure that these athletes are keeping strict form throughout. Up top in the right here, we have examples of what the lifts look like. We want to make sure that they're all hitting depth. They're all on the same scale. If the form is broken, that test will be thrown out for that athlete or not count. The purpose of these movements is to utilize all muscles involved and showcases all aspects of athleticism. The back squat, like we talked about, using all those muscles, the deadlift, the strict press there, the standing press. And we're going to make sure coaches there monitor everything, the lockout of elbows, the opening up the hips on the deadlift at the top of the deadlift, as you can see there, and then also hitting proper depth and opening up the hips on the squat. So our findings with these after we gathered our data after being having these lifters lift is overall the power lifters lifted the most weight, but they had a significant decrease in higher repetition ranges. So clearly the 1 rep max helped them a lot because it was significantly higher, and that's what they trained for. The CrossFit athletes weren't too far behind. They lifted less weight, but significantly won on the higher repetition ranges. So I'd say for an overall athlete, that utilized that high repetition ranges, they weren't too far behind on the 1 rep max or even the 5 rep max. Conclusion for future research. So overall athleticism, higher repetition is geared more towards that type of training. I really, if I were to go back and revise this research question, I would incorporate some aspect of plyometrics, aerobic capacity, gymnastics. This should be incorporated in the future so the studies can reveal the best overall athlete. An example of something I would include in if I were to redo this, I would keep the same repetitions, maybe lower down to just a 10 or 15 repetition max, but I would include like a max box jump. I would include like a 400 meter sprint for aerobic capacity or a 500 meter row. And then for gymnastics, I would also incorporate like strict pull-ups or push-ups, something of that aspect. Thanks, guys, for listening to my presentation.